All right, let's jump right in, shall we? Today, we're diving into a story that's, well, let's just say it's out there.
Definitely pushes the boundaries.
We're talking about Sławik, a Russian boy who claimed to have memories, vivid memories, of a past life on Mars.
A life on Mars. Bold claim.
Yeah, and we're going to be using a YouTube video as our guide, sort of. It's by Krzysztof Jackowski. He's a pretty well-known Polish psychic. In this video, he tries to, well, connect with Sławik's spirit and figure out what's what.
Sounds like a fascinating rabbit hole.
It is. And look, we know this might sound a little far out for some people. We get it. But we're asking you to come along for the ride. Keep an open mind, and let's see where this all leads.
What always gets me about Sławik's story compared to other past life claims is how much it touches on like all these big ideas, reincarnation obviously, but aliens maybe, and even multiverses, which is wild, especially his visions of what's going to happen to Earth. Not exactly cheery stuff.
Okay, hold on. Before we go full doomsday scenario, can we back up a bit? Who was Sławik, like, in this life, the one we know about?
Right, so Sławik was born in Russia in '96, and he died pretty young in 2006. Even as a kid, he was telling everyone about this past life on Mars, super detailed stuff, and supposedly had psychic powers, too. It's kind of taken on a life of its own over the years, his story has. Especially in those communities, you know, the reincarnation folks, the alien enthusiasts, and people into spiritual phenomena.
It's a potent mix, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Now, this Krzysztof Jackowski guy, you said he's a psychic, right? But is he legit? Like, does he have any credibility?
Yeah, he's actually quite respected, especially in Poland. He's been doing this for over 30 years, and there are documented cases. What's interesting is that he's known for being, well, pretty skeptical. Doesn't just jump into things, which is what makes his interaction with Sławik even more intriguing.
So he's not just some, like, crystal ball gazer.
Yeah.
How does he actually connect with Sławik?
In the video, he uses a photograph of Sławik, kind of like a focal point, to establish a connection. He's actually compared it to, like, dialing a phone number. It doesn't really matter if the person's right there or not. The act of connecting is similar. Like, he's suggesting that our minds, or maybe even souls, can communicate across time and space, just like we do with technology.
Okay, now that's trippy. What happens when he makes contact?
He picks up on something unusual right away, describes it as a really strong presence. It's almost like Sławik is trying to get a message across, like it's urgent. But here's the thing, it's not just a regular death and rebirth on Earth situation. Jackowski gets this sense that Sławik escaped to Earth from another dimension, a place he calls a multiverse, a term that Jackowski says, by the way, that Sławik used a lot. And this multiverse was, get this, a place of love.
Wait, hold on, a multiverse? Like, are we talking parallel universes, all that stuff physicists theorize about?
Seems like it. And it gets even weirder. Jackowski also senses these two, like, tall, luminous beings. Thinks they were Sławik's protectors while he was here on Earth. Kind of like guardians looking after him.
This is getting more and more sci-fi by the minute.
Yeah.
So what was this urgent message then? What was Sławik running from?
The core of Sławik's message, it's basically a warning about Earth's future. Not pretty stuff. Wars, societal collapse, betrayals between nations. Even talks about some kind of a fake god, like created by technology. Seriously heavy stuff.
Wow, coming from a kid, that's intense.
Any specifics? Like, what exactly did he say would happen?
There are some details, yeah. Like he talked about the sky changing, going from blue to this light pink color. That was his sign that everything was going downhill, you know, shifting into a really bad reality. And get this, he even mentioned specific places, Montenegro and Bosnia and Herzegovina. Said those regions would see a lot of conflict and suffering. The overall feeling, though, it's one of urgency, like a plea for humanity to wake up and see what's coming before it's too late. So, not exactly a feel-good message. Any solutions? Did he offer any ways to avoid this impending doom?
He did, and it's where that whole influence from the creator thing comes in. That phrase, Sławik believed in it strongly. He felt like only by seeking divine guidance, connecting to something bigger than ourselves, could we possibly counter all this bad stuff coming our way. Like, he felt humanity had to, like, really tap into that divine influence to survive the darkness.
Okay. Gotta admit, my head's spinning a little bit here. Prophecies, multiverses, divine intervention. This is a lot. Let's try to break it down a bit. Let's start with this whole multiverse thing. Is that like actually what scientists are talking about these days with parallel universes and all that?
Right. It's crazy how it's gone from sci-fi to something physicists are actually considering.
Yeah, exactly.
There's the many worlds interpretation, that's quantum mechanics stuff, right? Then you've got string theory and brain cosmology. It gets pretty complex. But they all kind of point to the same idea, the possibility of multiple universes existing, like alongside ours.
So is it possible then? Could Sławik have actually, escaped from one of these other universes and ended up here?
Well, I mean, we can't really prove or disprove it, not with what we know now.
Yeah.
But if we accept the idea of multiverses, then yeah, it's definitely on the table.
That's pretty wild.
But even beyond that, just the concept itself, I think it tells us something important. It says that reality is way more complicated, more connected than we tend to think. Like, there are these layers we can't even grasp yet.
Makes you wonder what else is out there.
Yeah.
Right? And like what our role might be in all of it.
Exactly. And this ties into another interesting part of Sławik's message, that whole influence from the creator thing.
Yeah, I was really struck by that phrase. It's powerful, but also kind of vague. What do you think he meant by that? Like, is he talking about connecting with some kind of higher power?
I think you're right. It does seem to point to that, to some source of guidance, strength, something beyond our physical world. And, you could interpret it in different ways depending on your own beliefs. Think of it like a gardener tending to their plants. They provide the right conditions for them to grow. Or a conductor leading an orchestra, bringing all the instruments together. Maybe influence from the creator is about aligning ourselves with a force that helps us grow, find our place.
I like that. The analogy makes it like easier to grasp.
Right.
So how does all that fit with Sławik's vision of the future, the bad stuff he talked about? Did he give any advice on how to deal with those challenges, assuming, it's all true?
He didn't give us a step-by-step guide, unfortunately, but he did emphasize being able to tell right from wrong, being able to see through manipulation, all that. Don't blindly trust technology, he said, and don't lose your humanity. Compassion, connection to something bigger than yourself. It's almost like he was saying, to get through the darkness, you got to tap into that influence from the creator, stay grounded.
So it's not like fate is set, like our choices still matter.
That's the idea, yeah. Maybe by aligning ourselves with this higher influence, we can make better choices. Like going back to the multiverse thing, maybe our choices affect which path we take, which reality we end up in.
Okay, so out of everything Sławik said about the future, what really gets to you? What stands out?
For me, it's the little details, like the sky changing color, going from blue to pink.
Yeah.
And, specifically mentioning those countries, Montenegro and Bosnia and Herzegovina, like it just makes it more real, more concrete somehow.
Totally agree. It's like unsettling.
And it's worth pointing out, those places, especially the Balkans, they have a long history of conflict. So you got to wonder, was Sławik tapping into something deeper, some like cosmic awareness of these patterns?
Chilling, right. So are we supposed to take this all literally? Like, are these prophecies that we need to act on, try to change things?
That's a question each of us has to answer for ourselves, really. There's no easy answer. The important thing is that we actually think about these things, explore them with an open mind, but also be critical. Don't just accept everything blindly.
That makes sense. It's not about blindly believing everything Sławik said. It's more about like using his story to think about bigger things, like what's real, what's possible.
Exactly. And that's why I find this whole deep dive so fascinating. It's not just about Sławik. It's about the bigger questions he raises, like what is consciousness? What's reality, really? The power of choice, our connection to something beyond ourselves.
Yeah.
Speaking of connections, though, we haven't talked much about those two luminous beings. The ones Jackowski sensed were protecting Sławik. Who were they?
Oh, yeah. I've been wondering about them, too. What did he say about them again?
Described them as tall, radiant, way more evolved than us, humans, that is. They seem to be watching over him, guiding him, maybe even shielding him from harm.
Like guardian angels.
Yeah.
Sent to, keep him safe on Earth. But why? What was their purpose?
We can only guess, really. Were they, benevolent beings looking out for him, or did they have some bigger agenda? Was there a cosmic reason for Sławik being here?
Maybe those beings. Maybe they orchestrated his escape from this multiverse, Like it was all part of a bigger plan. And it makes you think, are there unseen forces, good and bad, all around us, affecting our lives in ways we don't understand?
Whoa, that's a deep thought. And honestly, we might never know for sure. But it sure does challenge the way we see the world, doesn't it?
Definitely. That's what I love about these kinds of stories. They force you to think outside the box. Consider possibilities you never would have otherwise.
That's the beauty of exploration. So, what does all this mean for us, for our listeners? How can we apply these ideas to our own lives? Make them real?
That's the big question, isn't it? What would you say is the main takeaway here?
For me, the most important thing is remember you're not just a spectator in all of this. You have a role to play, choices to make. You have the power to shape your reality, both personally and as part of humanity.
And maybe, just maybe, by trying to connect to that influence from the creator, like Sosik talked about, maybe we can find the strength and wisdom to navigate these crazy times. Be better, be kinder.
Couldn't have said it better myself. This deep dive has been quite the journey. Multiverses, spiritual battles, divine influence, the power of choice.
Wow. It's
Yeah.
a lot to process, yeah. But we've only just scratched the surface, haven't we?
We have. And guess what? In the final part of our deep dive, we're going to shift gears a bit.
Yeah.
We're going to focus on Krzysztof Jackowski himself, his background, his methods, and what his experience with Sławik reveals about consciousness and the potential of the human mind.
Welcome back to our deep dive. Before we wrap up our exploration of Sławik Krzysztof, I think we need to spend a little more time on Krzysztof Jackowski, the psychic who connected with Sławik. I mean, his experience adds another layer to all of this, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. I mean, Jackowski's background, his whole perspective, it gives a different lens to view Sławik's story through. Adds certain weight to it.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned before that he's got, like, a real track record. Can you remind us about that? What makes him credible?
So Krzysztof Jackowski, he's actually pretty famous in Poland. They call him the clairvoyant detective sometimes because he's helped with actual criminal investigations using his psychic abilities.
Wow, seriously?
Yeah, been doing it for over 30 years. And there are actual documented cases where he's been successful. So he's definitely got a reputation in the parapsychology world, both good and bad, probably.
So he's not just, like, some random guy claiming to see things.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so how does he usually connect with spirits? Like, what's his process?
Well, with Sławik, remember, he used that photograph, right?
Right.
He says he often uses objects that were connected to the person he's trying to reach. It helps him create, like, a telepathic link.
Like tuning into a specific channel or something.
Yeah, something like that.
And what was it like for him when he connected with Sławik?
Well, he said it was super intense, almost too much to handle. Like, Sławik was desperate to communicate something urgent, that whole warning about the future.
And wasn't he, like, skeptical at first? Didn't he hesitate to connect with Sławik? I think you mentioned that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He actually sensed something dark or heavy around Sławik and made him reluctant to proceed.
Interesting.
But he went ahead anyway. And that makes the whole thing even more, like, believable.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a normal psychic reading. There was something really unusual going on.
This whole story really gets you thinking about consciousness,
Yeah.
and what we're capable of. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it definitely makes you realize that our minds are way more powerful than we give them credit for.
Yeah.
To be able to connect with someone's spirit across time and space using just a photo, I mean, that's something else. It's like we have all these hidden abilities, all this potential just waiting to be unlocked.
Like we're just using a tiny fraction of our brain power, right?
Right.
What if we could tap into all of it?
Exactly. And maybe by, like, exploring these possibilities, these unexplainable things, that's how we learn more about consciousness and maybe even discover new ways of seeing and interacting with the world.
Wow. That's a pretty amazing thought. And you know, it kind of sums up what this whole deep dive has been about, doesn't it?
Totally.
I've covered so much ground, from reincarnation to multiverses, prophecies, psychic detectives. It's a lot.
It's been wild, right?
Maybe we don't have all the answers, but that's okay. It's the journey that counts.
Couldn't agree more. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Sławik and his story, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
For me, it comes back to that idea of choice that Sławik talked about. Despite the darkness he saw in the future, he still believed we have the power to choose a different path, to do good, to connect with something bigger than ourselves. And maybe by tapping into that influence from the creator, like he said, maybe that's how we find the strength and wisdom to get through these uncertain times.
Beautifully said. And hey, listeners, this is just the start of your journey, Go out there, learn more about Sławik, research Krzysztof Jackowski and his work. The most important thing is keep asking questions. Challenge what you think you know about reality and never stop seeking knowledge and understanding.
It's been a wild ride exploring all of this with you. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the unknown. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep your mind open to the possibilities.